And a wonderful good morning to each of you. Already spoken to most of you, but at the same time to welcome and to begin our class. Time to start. Got a lot of material to continue to cover as we progress stage by stage, day by day, class by class in our study of from creation to eternity. I don't have a slide there, but I draw attention again to our timeline. The timeline that we created that shows the creation, and actually before, as we took a brief glance, and now all the way through, up to and through the time that Christ was manifested in the flesh here on earth. And then now we are about 2,000 years from that time. So that covers a little over 6,000 years. As we pointed out before, the book of Genesis covers over 2,400 of those 6,000 plus years. And we're coming to an end of our study of the book of Genesis. We've already looked at Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel. We spent a considerable amount of time on Abraham, and rightfully so, since there's more time, biblical time, chapters and verses time on Abraham than anyone else. Christ would maybe compare to that because he's found in the Old and the New. And not just Abraham in the book of Genesis, but as we've come from Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob, and from there to Joseph. It is said that Joseph, more is spent in time and verses and chapters, second only to Abraham. I've told you multiple times how much I have looked forward to Joseph. What an inspiration. What is said about him is credited and certainly stands out as someone that we could, as we've used the phrase, be like Daniel, be like Joseph, be like others, as they have served and pleased God. So we'll pick that up in just a moment. But first, let's go to our Father in prayer. Richard, would you lead us, please? Amen. On the front page of our bulletin today, beautiful picture that I found, and then I put the words with it, the idea of listening to God talk to us. When we read this book, that's what's happening. How awesome, unbelievable, blessed we are that we have the Holy Bible. I know you know that. It's not fresh and new. not new news, but to be reminded this is God breathed. This is God speaking. In Hebrews 1, in times past, he's spoken to the fathers by the prophets. In Hebrews 1, verse 2, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son. In John 18, we read, and John 16 as well, where Jesus, while on earth, said, I'll go back to the Father and ask him to send the Comforter, the Holy Spirit, and he shall guide you in all truth. That's what this is. God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, and the God the Spirit has brought us this inspired, authoritative word. So when we read about Abraham, Jacob, Isaac, Joseph, whoever, the purpose behind that is to learn what they did that was good and follow that. What they did that was wrong or mistakes they made and don't do that. It's written for our learning, Romans 15, verse 4. In other words, it's of little value if I know forward and backward about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph and all, unless I inwardly, mentally digest and make it prominent in my life. I see how Joseph did certain things, and I stand in awe of his righteousness, and I want to be like that, even though it's years apart, thousands of years later. But when I face temptation, when I have those that hate me, when I have various similar things, I learn from Joseph. So we've already looked at the dreams, the baker and butler. The dreams came true after Joseph interpreted it, and then Pharaoh dreamed a dream. The butler said, oh, I remember my mistake. I was supposed to remember Joseph, and I didn't do that. But he told Pharaoh, Joseph was in prison because of the false charges of Potiphar's wife, and he was brought out of that pitiful condition. He was shaved, bathed, changed clothes, came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh told him about the dream that he had had, and Joseph, in chapter 41, interpreted his dream. I know that it would be appropriate to say it this way, maybe even more dramatic if there was a more dramatic way. That was a defining moment. That was a pivotal, major event. The dream that Pharaoh dreamed, and Joseph interpreted it in a way that he spoke about what God was saying regarding what he needed to do. He spoke about 7 plenteous years, that's 47 through 49. Digressed for a moment, spoke about his 2 sons, and Manasseh and Ephraim. Then he spoke about 7 years of dearth, or famine as we would call it. And that all of the countries came to Egypt, came to Joseph. He now had been put in charge by Pharaoh of all that he had. And we've accentuated certain statements such as, I have seen that God has blessed you and blessed us because of you. What an influence. But from there, an economy of time, we're jumping a little bit. There's other verses and sometimes other actions. And in no way, I want to restate it emphatically. In no way am I suggesting that what we're maybe going over or skipping is of no value. That's not true. Everything is of value, but you can't cover and study all of it and get through in our lifetime. And I don't want to skip any of it, so it's a challenge by all means. But we come to Jacob. Now it's the time past the 7 years plenty. Joseph has been in charge and stored up and has plenty in Egypt. Jacob and his sons, he sends 10 of his sons because he hears about food in Egypt and that you can buy it there. So he sends them there, and we read about that in Genesis 42. In Genesis 42, the first few verses, Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, and Jacob said to his sons, "Why do you look one unto another? Behold, I've heard that there's corn there." Verse 3, and Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy corn in Egypt. Verse 6, very bluntly it says, appropriately, and Joseph was the governor over the land. So now those 10 brothers of Joseph, the ones of which had put him in a pit and then sold him into slavery, hated him, envied him, jealous of him. They were wicked to Joseph. Now the 10 brothers are standing before Joseph. In verse 8 of 42, it says, Joseph knew his brothers, but they knew not him. You can just imagine the change that has transpired, the time that has passed. Now he's in, again, pictures don't mean anything. What we found, we don't know what it looked like. But you can imagine that he was attired as a governor, a person of authority. And his 10 brothers did not know him. He inquired of them, and he even accused them of being spies. That's verse 9. To see the nakedness of the land that you're come to. And they said, No, Lord, but to buy food are thy servants come. Verse 11, we are all one man's sons. We are true men. The servants, thy servants are no spies. And he said to them, Nope, but to see the nakedness of the land you come to. And they said, Thy servants are 12 brethren, the sons of one man. Well, Joseph knew all of that. He knew what they were saying. He was testing them. He said, we're the sons of one man in the land of Canaan, and behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is not. Who's that one is not? It's him. They knew that. And Joseph said unto them, That is it that I spake unto you, saying, You're spies. Hereby you shall be proved by the life of Pharaoh. You shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come thither. That's verse 15. You see his plan? He's not being deceitful. He wants to see his youngest brother. He's telling them, if you're not spies, here's how you prove that. Verse 16, send one of you and let him fetch your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be proved, whether there be any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you're spies. And he put them all together into ward 3 days. And Joseph said unto them the third day, This do, and live. For I fear God. I hope that I pause and accentuate the appropriate and correct and powerful passages or phrases. This is one of them. This is one of those that you might just kind of read and go on. Because he's telling them, here's what I want you to do, and you can live, for I fear God. But you see, Joseph has demonstrated, not perfectly, he was human, but he has demonstrated his faith in God, his trust in God. The word fear here could synonymously be translated respect God. Verse 19, if ye be true men, let one of your brothers be bound in the house of this prison. Go ye, carry corn for the famine of your houses, but bring your youngest brother unto me, and so shall your words be verified, and you shall not die. And they did it. I'm going to paraphrase the next several verses. They went back to their father. They told their father all that had happened. He went down to verse 31 for an example. He told his dad, we're true men. This is what I told them. We're not spies. And he told us in verse 34, bring your youngest brother to me. Verse 36, you find Jacob's response. And Jacob their father said unto them, me have ye bereaved of my children. Joseph is not here. I'm going to insert the word here. And Simeon is not. He was left in prison. And you will take Benjamin away. All these things are against me. And Reuben said unto his father, slay me, slay my two sons, if I bring him not back to you. Deliver him into my hand, and I'll bring him to thee again. What Jacob say? My son shall not go down with you, for his brother's dead. He thought Joseph was. And he is left alone. If mischief befall him by the way in the which you go, then shall ye bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. I've heard my mother say to us 4 children at times, y'all are killing me. We were mischief, messing up, whatever it is. But in a very real way, Jacob is saying, if I lose my youngest, it'll kill me. I'll go to the grave. Time passes. Look at verse 41. After Joseph gives them food, that's chapter 42. Now skip the part about the money. That's an interesting story, but right now there's a few things that I'd like to get on to instead of that. But money, the money that they paid for the food put back in their sacks, and they're scared, understandably so. He's going to accuse us of really being spies or thieves or whatever. Jacob would not let the younger one go. But then in chapter 43, as we're narrowing down and getting closer to chapter 50, the end of the story, the famine, verse 1 of 43, was distressful, sore, extreme. Verse 2, and it came to pass when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said, you're going to have to go again. Buy us a little food. We have nothing. I find an emotional scenario happening now. In verse 3, Judah says unto Jacob, the man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, you shall not see my face except your brother be with us. Don't you come back here without your brother. Verse 5, but if thou wilt not send him, we will not go down. For the man said, tells him again, you shall not see my face unless your brother come. Israel replies, wherefore dealt ye so ill with me as to tell the man whether you had yet a brother? Why'd you even do that? And they answered him, the man asked us straightly, straight up, directly, we might say it. The man asked us, of your kindred, is your father yet alive? Have you another brother? In other words, Joseph knew the answers to most of the questions. But they answered him correctly. And we told him, according to the tenor of these words, could we certainly know that he would say, bring your brother down? We didn't know he was going to say that, Father. And Judah said unto Israel, his father, send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and shall not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. I will be surety for him. Of my hand shalt thou require him. If I bring him not unto me and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. There's been in probably all of our lives conversations. A few years ago, a couple of my daughters said, we need to have a powwow. We need to have a talk. I forgot what it was, grandchildren or something of that nature. They had a powwow. They had a talk. And it pivots down to verse 13. Take also your brother and arise, go again unto the man. What a sacrifice. What a potential, devastating, terrible moment. You can hear that father's heart writhing in pain. Time has passed. There's been 7 years of plenty, 7 years of now famine in the process. Several years has the father thought his son was consumed by a wild beast, looking upon his coat covered in blood. But they're about to die. They have no food. It was gone. And Judah is telling them, literally, go buy it. Let me catch up. Now we come to the fact when Joseph, look at verse 16. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of his house, bring these men home and slay and make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon. The men did what Joseph said. But verse 18, and the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house. And because of the money that was returned in their sacks as the first time as they brought it, that he might seek occasion, retaliation, punishment for that, and fall upon us and take us for bondmen and our asses, donkeys as well. 19, and they came near to the steward of Joseph's house, and they communed with him at the door of the house. They're kind of putting a finger on the pulse. They're talking to one of the hiremans, maybe. And they said, "Oh, sir, we came indeed down at the first time to buy food, and it came to pass when we came to the end that we opened our sacks, and behold, every man's money was in the mouth of this sack, and the money in full weight, and we brought it again in your hand. Here's what you put in. Here's what was in our sack, and we're bringing it back." In verse 23, and he said, "Peace be to you. Fear not. Your God and the God of your father hath given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money." And he brought Simeon out unto them. And the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their asses provender. He fed their donkeys. And they made ready the present against Joseph, came at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there. But the more pivotal time is about to happen, beginning in verse 26. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed themselves to him in the earth. And he asked them of their father, the welfare. And he asked, "Is your father well? The old man of whom you spake, is he yet alive?" See, Joseph did not know that. And they answered, "Thy servant, our father, is in good health. He is yet alive." And they bowed down their heads and made obeisance. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your younger brother, of whom you spake unto me?" And he said, "God be gracious unto thee, my son." Verse 30 is emotional. And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother. And he sought where to weep, where he could go and cry. And he entered into his chamber and wept there. Years has passed. Memory is flooding his mind. Very likely reliving most of all of the things that had transpired, had happened, what they had done to him. We might even say, understanding if he would be raging inside, angry, boiling over the mean things, the wicked things that they had done to him. But continue reading, verse 31. He washed his face and went out and refrained himself, kind of reset himself, and said, "Set on bread." And they set on for him by himself, and for them by themselves, and for the Egyptians, which did eat with them by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination unto the Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men marveled one at another. And he took and sent messes unto them from before him. But Benjamin's mess was 5 times as much as any of the others. And they drank and were merry with him. In chapter 44, in verse 1, Joseph said, "Fill their sacks." In verse 2, he put his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. In verses 4 and following, he sent his steward after them. And you The silver cup was there. Put it there. Had him put it there. In verse 14, well, verse 6, they overtook them, and he spoke unto them these words. Wherefore saith my Lord these words, God forbid that thy servants should do according to this thing. Behold, the money which are found in the sack's mouth, we brought again unto thee, and now you've done this. They were upset. They tore their clothes, verse 13. They fell down before him on the ground, verse 14. The verse 15, and Joseph said unto them, what deed is this that you've done? Would you not that such a man as I can certainly divine? Judah said, what shall we say unto you, Lord? Verse 17, God forbid that I should do so, but the man in whose hand the cup is found, he shall be my servant. And as for you, get you up in peace unto your father. Let's turn the page. For an economy of time, we come now to where they say he reveals himself. That's verse 45. They've come again. I cannot improve on telling the story better than the scriptures. So begin with me at verse 1. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before them that stood by him. And he said, cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brothers. Numbers chapter 32 in the book of Numbers in the Old Testament, verse 23 says, be sure your sins will find you out. In Galatians chapter 6, we're told, whatever you sow, you're going to reap. This was their reckoning day. Maybe for a long time, they thought they'd got away with it. They got rid of the ones they hated. The one that they hated, they envied. They couldn't even talk peaceably to him, Joseph. Now he's standing before them, the governor, a man of great power, life and death, whether or not they get food. Let's read it together. And Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came close. And he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt, I might add. Our minds might wonder, did they gasp? Did they jump back in fear? Or was it so silent that you could have heard a feather hit the floor or ground? They had not recognized him. And now he's saying, I am your brother. But don't be grieved, he says. Don't be angry. Listen to the man. What kindness, what love, what an attitude of forgiveness. Don't be mad. Don't be angry with yourselves that you sold me. He knows. He recognizes. He knows they know. But listen, not just to Genesis 50 and verse 20. We'll get to that eventually, where God meant it for good. You meant it for evil. But now he says, for God did send me. It was God that sent me. It wasn't you. You weren't in charge. You weren't the ones that did it. You may blame yourself, and you did it physically, but it was God that sent me before you to preserve life. Here's God's magnificent plan. Pharaoh did not know what to do until he dreamed. Joseph interpreted it, and then Pharaoh, in his wisdom, put Joseph, because there was no other greater or wiser than Joseph, put Joseph in charge, that during the years of plenty, it could be stored up. He preserved life, but it was God that did that. But he explains further. For these 2 years have the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in the which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. We've already endured a minor 2 years. There's 5 more to come. They've already been to Egypt to get corn, to live, to survive more than once. And Joseph is telling them there are yet 5 more years yet to come of this. But listen again in the same way that he says it here. And God sent me before you to preserve you. Oh, now it's personal. It's not just the land. It's not just Pharaoh. It's not just Egypt, people in Egypt, but to preserve you, a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Last Sunday, I mentioned that I couldn't hardly wait to get to some of this that emphasizes God's control, God's sovereignty, the magnificence of God, and how God choreographs providentially through their lives, and I believe does ours as well. He is saying to them, don't you be angry with yourselves. Don't you grieve and mourn that you sold me. You did wrong. In chapter 50, verse 22, it says, you meant it for evil, but God meant it to save lives by this great deliverance. Pause just a minute with me. 2 or 3 months ago, in our study of salvation and the word redemption, the idea of a deliverer or deliverance, God is a redeemer. Christ is our redeemer. Redemption is seen throughout the old and the new law, and we find maybe more of it now and understand it a little bit more. God was looking out for your welfare. He knew what you needed even before you knew that you needed it, and He's provided for it years of plenty, and now the storing of it up that you may be able to survive right now. He was a deliverer, and you were a part of that. I love it again, verse 8. It is not you that sent me hither. It wasn't you that sold me into slavery. It wasn't you that caused me to be here in Potiphar's house and interpreting Pharaoh's dream. It wasn't you that caused me to store up all this food. It wasn't you at all that sent me hither, but it was God. Are we getting so big at times that we think we're in control? Do we at times think that we know as much as God? This story erupts and brings to the surface the fact that it is not us, feeble, frail, finite individuals, but it is God. And listen to me, please, ever so carefully. It is God that has brought us, you and I, to this moment in time. He has blessed us so richly. He's put us where He wanted us to be. Well, I'm not talking about that we do not have a power of choice. We are free moral agents. We could rebel against God, as indeed many did in the old law. And they did not do right, even though it was God's will that ultimately Joseph be there. It was evil that they did. But it was God. And He hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and Lord of all of his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Joseph didn't say, well, it was because Potiphar saw how intelligent and wise and handsome that I was, and he knew that. No, he didn't say that. Joseph didn't say it's only because that Pharaoh, I interpreted a dream, yes, and Pharaoh thought me to be the wise man, and here I've done this great and wonderful thing of storing up all this and during the land. He didn't say that. Gavin, please. Yeah, absolutely. I heard somebody say just a few days ago that made me think of it when you spoke that. A lot of people don't want to be submissive to God. They just want to give God advice. In other words, they want to tell God what I want to do. I don't want to do this, Father, but I'll do this. That's maybe the attitude of so many people today. Joseph didn't do that. Joseph became a father to Pharaoh, Lord of all the house and ruler over Egypt, because God put him in that position. God is the one that sent me. God put me there. Yes, Newell, please. Right. Yes. Newell, you've opened up a beautiful, awesome can of worms, want to call it that. I have heard, and maybe I'll try to do that before next week, a comparison between Moses and Christ and the similarities. Many awesome things that Moses and Christ shared, but Joseph and Christ as well. So yes, what you said is so true, and we could plunge much deeper into just those things alone and learn from the old and the new, even as it is directly pertinent to us today. Beautiful thoughts. So Joseph says, hurry up, go up to your father, my father, and say unto him, thus saith thy, go and tell my father, thus saith your son Joseph. Does that mean that they had to go fess up? Does that mean they have to say, we deceived you? I suppose they might have concocted an idea of, well, we found the code and it had blood on it and we didn't know if he was alive or not. That would have been further deception and lie. I would like to believe that they went back and said, what we said to you was wrong. He is alive. And that God hath made him Lord of all Egypt. And come down unto me and tarry not. Thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen. That I've used the term before, plush pastures. That's the way some commentaries speak about the land of Goshen. And thou shalt be near unto me, thou, thy children, thy children's children, thy flocks and herds, and all that you have, and there will I nourish thee. Tell my father I'm alive, and that come down here, and I'll nourish thee, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thy house come to poverty. And behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaketh to you. But listen to it again. And ye shall tell my father of my glory in Egypt, and all that you have seen, you've witnessed, you've heard, and you shall haste or hurry and bring down my father hither. He tells him, here's what I want you to tell my dad. I want you to bring my father. But before they left, Joseph, fell upon Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. And moreover, he kissed all his brethren and wept upon all of them. And after that, his brethren talked with him, and the fame thereof, well, you can just imagine how it was heard throughout Pharaoh's house. Joseph's brethren are come, and it pleased Pharaoh well, and his servants. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, matter of fact, let's pause at this point, another entry, and we're already past time. Boy, time flies by. Maybe, I hope we're having fun the way we say it sometimes. We're going to look at chapter 45 and look at more as this grand and awesome, wonderful account of real people unfolds, and anticipate when Joseph sees his father again and the emotions.